from the Energy Boutique with your energy and ascension forecast for Sunday, August 31st to Saturday, September 6th. Okay, so last week, the reprogramming began, and of course, we are definitely feeling in real time how we're flipping the script, how we're restructuring not only our inner realm, but how it is that we see the potentialities in our outer realm. And a lot of that is, of course, we're in Virgo season. We are identifying the problems in order to fix them, heal them, repair them. And we are making the smaller little adjustments in our mental plane, in our heart space, to help make the adjustments in our patterns, our behaviors that, of course, we're going to start putting into action out in the external realm. Now, we had a major change in our heart space this past week, specifically because Venus left that Cancer energy behind. She kind of put down the emotional baggage, so to speak. She shifted into Leo energy here on the 25th, which of course definitely reignited a new spark, fire, and flame in that heart space. We are building the boldness, the bravery, the courage needed to not only declare how our heart has changed, but where it is now that we have new passions, new desires that we absolutely need to pursue. Mercury, ruler of the mental plane, cleared his post-retrograde shadow period on the 25th as well. And that was very evident that the heart and head are coming into a brand new agreement, a brand new relationship dynamic with each other. Of course, Mercury also in this Leo energy is raring to go. And as we kind of move into this week, we are going to really kind of see where that fire energy is kind of, again, reigniting a new fire, spark, flame in our headspace, where new levels of creativity, new passions, new desires need to take over as we get launched into Virgo energy. We'll talk about that in just a second. Yesterday, on the 28th, we had Uranus, the Great Awakener, come into a sextile with Neptune, who is retrograde in Aries energy. And this is first of 5 different interactions that will be taking place, carrying us all the way into 2027. It's a highly significant year. If you've been with me for any amount of time, you would know that I've been telling you to mark 2027 on your calendar as the year in which the world is officially going to change. And I would say for the better, but of course you got to kind of get rid of the crap, the junk, the gunk, if you will, before you can actually see the positives come out of some unfortunate situations. But Uranus and Neptune have already kind of triggered and activated this destabilization of the systems, of the foundations and structures that we have been operating on in order to kind of gain a better image, a better vision, if you will, for the future. And this is, of course, challenging those old ideas, that old information, those old ways of thinking and communicating and sharing wisdom and knowledge with the world. It's also blending our intellect with our intuition. And it's also triggering and activating the spiritual warrior within each and every single one of us to do what needs to be done to, again, eliminate the old, purge the old, release the old, specifically pain and trauma patterns, in order for us to, again, create the space to bring these creator abilities online, full stop, so that we can absolutely start recreating the realm and reality of our choosing. So we're going to be sitting in that activation for the next couple of years. Again, fine-tuning each and every time that these two are coming together. We'll have another activation in November, one mid-2026, and then the other activations with its final perfection will be complete in 2027. So we have that kind of playing in the backdrop, which is going to be kind of making the finer tune adjustments to the frequency signature of the collective over the next couple of years, preparing us for what is going to be a very pivotal point in humanity's history come 2027. And of course, this week we have been building towards the first quarter moon that will be popping off in Sagittarius energy early on August 31st. And that is going to be the first action point, decision point, choice point based off of some of the realizations that we had under the new moon in Virgo. So we're still very much in the very first Virgo cycle. There will be 2 this year, just because, again, we have an eclipse coming at us. And, there is a lot of, I'm going to call it a lot of shadow work that we had to do over the last couple of days with the moon in Scorpio energy. But you know what? Having Virgo season and then the moon in Scorpio kind of fine tune and tweak the wounds, the pain, the trauma that was still alive and well within us in order to, again, make the adjustments and the improvements necessary in our programming. This has been a very intense week. And so to come out of the darkness, out of that Scorpio energy, get launched into Sagittarius energy, which is always the light at the end of a very dark tunnel anyways, and then to have a first quarter activation here, this is definitely going to, again, kind of put us in a new place within ourselves. We understand ourselves a little bit better. We understand what needs to be done. There's a new truth that we're standing in. There is new possibilities that now get revealed to us. There is a new hope, a new wish, a new dream that is currently getting pieced together in our inner realm. And of course, as we kind of move through this particular lunar cycle, we are going to start seeing those puzzle pieces snap together very quickly to reveal this new mission, this new purpose, this new path that we will all be on as we get sucked into eclipse season and of course get spat out. So what do we got going on this week, you may ask? Well, we're going to close out August, which of course was the vibration of 8. The 8 energy is very transformative. And so if you need to go back and take a listen to what August was all about and what we should have learned and all the triggers and activations that we needed to go through in order to fine tune this new version of self, by all means, go do that. But we're going to be shifting into September, which carries the vibration of 9. And we're already in a year of 9, being 2025. And so to be in a month of 9, in a year of 9, we can definitely expect some endings and closures, some loose ends to be wrapped up, tied up, severed completely. We have to understand that the 9 energy not only provides a completion point, but it gives us a new level of connection to our intuition, a new level of inspiration, of motivation to work with. It kind of illuminates, if you will, all of the hardships of the endings and closures that we have to go through in order to prepare the path that we are about to be catapulted upon. And so we're wasting no time coming into September. We are going to see Mr. Saturn, the Lord of Karma, dip back into the Pisces energy, sit at that 29 critical crisis karmic degree for quite some time, which of course is going to put us in a totally weird situation, weird vibe entirely, because of course, Pisces energy is soul contracts. It's intuition. It's, the unconscious realm of the collective. And Saturn, who is here for the long term, he dips back into this Pisces energy to further dissolve and deconstruct the old false systems of belief, the old, let's call it systems and structures that society is watching collapse each and every single day. And as much as we need that to happen, it is very much going to feel like we get kind of thrown back into situations and circumstances that we found ourselves in at the beginning of this year that we were eager beaver to get out of. We couldn't wait for Saturn and his buddy Neptune to leave that Piscean energy to do a deep dive, launching into the fire energies, if you will, of Aries. And then, as I kind of set the scene at the beginning of this year with the 2025 year ahead overview, we busted into this quote unquote new realm. We busted into seeing this new version of self and were so overwhelmed with all of the roles and responsibilities of what actually being responsible, being the creator of your own destiny actually looks like, that we found ourselves in a state of paralysis. There was kind of, spinning tires and just creating smoke. There was no action to actually be had. And at this particular juncture, we're going to watch all of these heavy hitting planets creep back into the energies that we were so excited to actually bust out of. And that in itself is going to feel a little bit comfortable, a little bit more familiar because we know what to expect there. We did this before, but also remember that we were uncomfortable to the point where we couldn't wait to bust out of those particular energies. And yet now we find ourselves kind of, wandering back to an uncomfortable situation and circumstance just because, again, it is a little bit more predictable than some of the energies in which we've been sitting in. So again, having Saturn kind of retrograde back into that Pisces energy is going to be a little bit of a emotional shitstorm. I think it's very interesting that, again, Saturn, who is the Lord of Karma, dipping back into the zodiac sign that does rule over our karma and our soul contracts prior to the eclipse that we're about to have in Pisces energy. I think it's all very divinely scripted. Now, of course, that's not all we have going on, but of course, even if it was the only thing going on, I think that that would be enough because that in itself is a very heavy weight emotionally and spiritually for us to carry. But on the second, we're going to see Mercury, ruler of the mental plane, ruler of information, communication, how it is that we express ourselves, leave this Leo energy behind that we've been sitting in for a very long time due to Mercury's retrograde in this Leo energy. And Mercury is going to be moving into his rulership in Virgo energy. So you want to talk about clarity? Now, let me tell you, the clarity that we have been seeking, that we have been praying for, yeah, it's coming, but it's coming in such a heavy load of clarity, of realization, of truth, that we may actually be complaining about the amount of information, the amount of clarity that we actually receive all at one time. And we're going to be overwhelmed and overloaded in our headspace for a lot of reasons here this week. But specifically, when Mercury actually shifts into this Virgo energy, we just get so overwhelmed because the Virgo energy likes to focus on one thing at a time, likes to focus on the smaller details of the greater, grander plan or project. And we're being kind of, I'm going to say, oversaturated with emotion and with information and with change here this week, that it's going to be too much for us to process. So yeah, clarity is a great thing. Yeah, information is a great thing. Wisdom and knowledge is a great thing. But when you've been kind of on the side of lack for as long as we have, and then all of a sudden a dump truck shows up and dumps the whole load of clarity, insight, information, and wisdom that we've been lacking all at once, it's really hard to decide where to start sifting through that particular load of newness. So that in itself is going to definitely have a major spin, kind of, I'm going to say, start spinning very quickly in that headspace. We'll talk about that as we get going here. Now, special mention on the 3rd, we have Jupiter, the planet of growth, expansion, beliefs, abundance, and blessings in this Cancer energy, coming into a trine, which is a beautiful interaction with the North Node in Pisces. So again, we see this week that there is another karmic activation setting up pre-eclipse season. Technically, we're already in the eclipse season, but as we inch closer to the 7th, we're being sucked into it. Okay, it is like a swirling whirlpool of karma that we are being tossed into, and having Jupiter trine this North Node is very much bringing attention to soul contracts, to the contracts that we are entering into, the ones that we are exiting, the ones that need to be rewritten or renegotiated. This is going to highlight divine timing, being in the right place at the right time with the right people, with the right mindset. This is downloads coming from the higher self, kind of illuminating, if you will, where these new paths, these new pivot points are unfolding. And the thing about it is that it's coming at us whether we're ready or not, whether we're signing up for this or not. And Jupiter tends to magnify and expand whatever it is that we're kind of in and touching, and we're going to be all up in our feels. We're going to be all up in our intuition. Our inner realm is kind of being reprogrammed and restructured due to the Virgo season that we're in. And so it's going to be a little bit of a difficult situation and scenario because that water energy wants us to go with the flow and really just kind of ride the wave, so to speak. The North Node in Pisces, particularly asking us to surrender control, while Virgo season, and now with Mercury in Virgo, wants to control everything. wants to control the finer details, wants to control the way that we think, the way that the world works, wants to control everything, because that's how the ego feels safe and secure, is being able to control and to predict the outcome of whatever action we are actually looking to make. But of course, when you're on the higher path and you're bringing your higher self online as the permanent operating system, you have to release control. You have to surrender to it. You have to understand that the universe is made up of ebb and flow, of ever-changing energies, of unpredictable energies. And, it's the ego's way of trying to survive by controlling everything. But the soul and the spirit needs you to release it all, needs you to surrender. And so we're definitely going to be sitting in a very interesting point come the 3rd, not only with that activation, but the moon actually shifts into the Capricorn energy at that particular point. Capricorn energy, although very connected to, reality, it's rolled over by Saturn. So again, we're definitely being tossed into getting hella focused on karmic contracts, specifically for the long term, because that's what Capricorn energy is all about, is building the system, the structure that is going to support us in the long term for us to reach our goals, our visions, our dreams. And so there's just a lot of pressure really building up here this week, especially as we kind of, find ourselves mid to late week, because we're getting closer and closer to that eclipse event. And we're not even really done yet. On the 6th, which is just hours before this, full moon total lunar eclipse peaks, we're going to have Uranus, the Great Awakener, the destabilizer, if you will, the wild card energies, go retrograde in Gemini. So, Uranus is the rebellious spirit that we all have within us that needs to be triggered and activated in order to fight against the constructs, the limitations, the restrictions that either we ourselves have built or that we have been shoved into due to our upbringing, due to societal structuring. Now, Uranus in Gemini energy as a whole has been about, the higher realms of intellect, Uranus, and the lower levels of intellect, Gemini, kind of breaking down the wall, the partition between the two, in order for us to be able to channel information and insights from the higher realms of intelligence and logically, practically sort through that information and challenge the way that we've done things, specifically the way that we have learned in the past, brought new information in, challenged our ideas, our beliefs, really kind of challenge the wisdom, whether or not we're just accumulating information and wisdom just to feel like a collector or whether we're actually using it. Now, having Uranus go retrograde, of course, is going to illuminate for us where it is that we're having a hard time overriding those old narratives, those old dialogues, that old perception, that old lens, that old way of communicating, seeing the world, forming new information and opinions out of the data, the details that are coming at us in the world. And so where Uranus is heavily connected to innovation and technology and science, we kind of have to expect that there's going to be some sort of Mercury retrograde on the greatest steroids that have ever existed in the Earth's history situation to take place, because there's going to be all kinds of glitching. Now, not only just glitching in technology, but there's going to be glitching in our brains because, of course, Uranus energy and Gemini energy rule over our actual brains. So we're going to be talking about that in this Ascension forecast as well. But I'm just trying to kind of set you up, prepare you, and prime you for another very intense, very unpredictable, very wackadoodle week. So considering the fact that we start the week off with the moon in Sagittarius and we end the week off just on the peak precipice of having this total lunar eclipse in Pisces, we're going from Sag energy to Pisces energy. So that's mutability. Mutability is a huge indicator to say that this week we're going to need to be flexible. We're going to need to go with the flow. We're going to need to be adaptable, because it is better to roll than be dragged. We also need to kind of take the hints and clues here that because we're in a mutable season and we have all of these mutable shifts going on, that this is going to be the week that changes the game. Now, I know I've been talking about how Virgo season is the pivot point in the calendar that in years' time, we're going to be looking back upon and saying, yep, that's when shit hit the fan. Yep, that's why I'm on the path that I'm currently on, because everything that happened in Virgo season of 2025 kind of flipped over the dominoes that led me to this particular path. And I'm not saying that that's a negative thing at all. I'm just saying this month, this week is the very first set of dominoes that get flipped over that essentially catapult us in this new pivot path, in this new mission, in this new purpose that is not very clear to us right now because we're in eclipse energies, which means that that's being eclipsed from our view. We can't see it. We cannot see it. We want to see it. We want to understand it. We want to know what's going on. That's the ego programming wanting control. And so we have to do the best that we can here this week with all of these ever-changing energy shifts to not only stay as grounded as possible, and it's a very interesting dynamic to stay grounded and stable and fixated in a particular position while still being open enough to go with the flow and to be flexible and adaptable. It's a very interesting balance that not many of us are able to achieve without great effort. We are definitely going to be challenged with that particular balancing act here this week. So, of course, I will have the September energy forecast coming at you if you are interested in all of the full forecast, not only for the daily energy forecast, but for all of the monthly astro events. I'm going to recommend that you subscribe to the full forecast channel that I have available. There is a link in all of the, mini stories or shorts or whatever the hell YouTube calls them over here. There is a link for that particular channel access posted in every single thread. And of course, you should see things flashing up in the corners of your videos here, and those are direct links as well. I thank those of you that have already jumped over, taking full advantage of those full forecasts, hopefully, especially when the energy gets wackadoodle and it peaks like it will be happening to us and for us here this week, that those particular full forecasts help you to kind of stay ahead of the game. Now, we're doing some moon guide work. I know I already kind of talked about it, but if you are following along with the moon guide, there is going to be another full chapter available to you to do this first quarter moon work. And of course, you can find all of that over on my Patreon. And if you have not signed up to even explore having a free trial over on my Patreon, now would be the time to do it. That's going to launch you into September. And of course, that's when the new horoscopes come out, the new shadow work comes out, the new everything comes out for that new month. And speaking about the new month, my booking calendar will be available, open to the public as of September 1st. Right now, if you are a Patreon VIP, of course, you can get that VIP pricing and snag a spot before it goes public because they don't last long. So with all of that out of the way, let's dive into the Ascension symptoms that are likely going to pop off due to this week's energy. And again, just a reminder, if you want to do a deep dive and really understand how, what Ascension is all about, how all of these energies manifest in the body, how you can predict them, how you can prepare for them, how you can get rid of them once they happen, go ahead, either download my book or purchase it off of Amazon. You can find both of those links on my website. I appreciate those of you. I did see a little bit of a spike in people ordering my book here in August, and I would kind of forecast that the reason for that is because the energy has gotten a little bit out of hand. And there's no point in walking through this particular healing journey confused AF. There's no reason for it. I laid everything out in very digestible ways of receiving that information and exploring what this is all about in that book. And again, there is references and guides there, breath work, practices, remedies, everything you need to understand what the F is happening to you, energetically speaking, is in that book. So go ahead, grab a copy, keep it close by, and never guess ever again what is actually going on with you, why you feel cray-cray. It's all there. So talking about cray-cray, we are all going to feel cray-cray here this week. Why? Well, I don't know if you've noticed, but time is speeding up. We have been in this eclipse energy now since essentially the new moon in Virgo on the 23rd. And the closer that we get to an actual eclipse event, time accelerates. And time not only is accelerating, but there is a little bit of a time distortion happening here because all of the versions of self that are alive and well and all of the other dimensions that are all connected to your original source code, they are needing to defrag and they are needing to essentially clean and cleanse and purify that individual vibration frequency in their respective dimensions in order for us to kind of assimilate and put together this source code in a new frame of wholeness. Now, for those of you who would be like, oh yeah, she's on drugs. Yeah, probably should be. Here's the thing though, when you kind of grasp the concept that there is a multitude of you, different versions of you, walking around in different timelines, walking around in different dimensions, it starts making a whole hell of a lot more sense why you feel certain things that you aren't directly experiencing in your physical realm, why you dream of people, places, and things that you don't have a direct reference to, why it is that there are memory flashbacks, why it is that there's physical sensations, why it is that you're just having an experience that doesn't match the physical reality in which you're having. And the reason for that is because a different version of you is going through something that you can pick up on because essentially your soul threads, your oversoul, it all goes back to the same spot, the same information. And when we kind of understand that there are different versions of self in different dimensions, in different storylines and timelines, that they are all individually going through their own healing journey, that they are going through their own individualized and customized shadow work program. We are all going through, doesn't matter what time, what dimension, what storyline, what version of self, right now, cosmically speaking, we are going through a purification. And when we go through a purification, it's as if that program, that avatar, has to get cleansed. We have to look at it like a computer program. We have to defrag it, remove all of the broken code, all of the old data packets, all of the, let's call it, apps and systems that aren't working as well as they once used to. We have to kind of cleanse that. We have to release it. We have to purify that. And then what happens, especially as we go through eclipse events, is that karmically speaking, on an oversoul level, the eclipse energies kind of mesh all of those versions of self back into one wholeness. Take all of those timelines, mesh them back into one timeline. Take all of those dimensional selves, smush them back into one dimension before they're fragmented off again. And so this is why not only are we experiencing things that don't necessarily make sense to us in our own physical experience, and essentially that's because a different version of self in a different place, in a different timeline, in a different storyline, in a different dimension is going through their own shit. And so here this week, we're going through this reprogramming. There is this time acceleration sucking us into this eclipse gateway that we will be very, very much fully immersed in from September 7th until the 21st of September. And then, post 2 weeks in order to actually feel a little bit quote unquote normal again. And then 6 months it takes for all of the, let's call it, full operating systems to become individualized again. That's why many people will say, well, you can see the effects of the eclipse events for up to 6 months, or it takes 6 months in order to actually see them manifest. And that is simply because we come to this mergence point under the eclipse energies, and then it takes us that long to kind of separate and individualize all of those different versions of self in their respective dimensions and timelines and storylines once again. And so as we continue to do all of these meetup points in these eclipse energies, which again happen twice a season, or I should say 2 eclipse seasons per year. That is all versions of self coming back into one and then separating again. That's how healing work happens. And so in the New Age spiritual community, when you say, oh, well, we collapsed a timeline, well, that is when all of those versions of self come in. We kind of find ourselves into a new level of completion, if you will. And when it's time for that oversoul to individualize itself again and go back to its respective timelines and dimensions, the lowest timeline that carries the most pain, that carries the most density, that usually gets X'd out at a particular point of your healing journey if you're into this and you're doing the work. And a lot of that means that let's call it the lowest level of self, gets kind of merged with the level up from that. And that's how essentially we're doing the work to bring new versions of self online. We're not really looking to redevelop a brand new oversoul. We're looking to bring all of the fragmented parts of self into a state of wholeness before we fragment off again, and hope to God that when there's this analysis of where this oversoul has now developed and evolved into, that when we individualize and individuate again, that there is the lowest version of that self that doesn't have a dimension or a timeline to go to because the pain and trauma was healed. Therefore, that version, that dimension, that timeline ceased to exist and essentially gets merged to the second level version of self, if you will. And that version of self then starts walking the storyline of that dimension, timeline, and frequency. This is how we do the healing work. And so, there's always a lot of healing work to do. And our hope for everything is to essentially collapse the lowest version of self that is stuck in the lowest density, that is carrying the most pain and trauma, that is stuck in the cellular memory, that again, when we come together as all the fragments of the oversoul, if we've done enough evolving in all the other timelines and versions of self, we will be able to collapse the timeline that the pain and suffering of that lower version of self is in. And that essentially frees and liberates all the other tiers, all the other higher dimensions of self to not be, let's call it, confined, limited, restricted by that lower level vibration and frequency. I hope that makes sense. So yeah, we have time acceleration going on. We have time distortion going on. We have these interdimensional bleeds happening, which means that you could be experiencing a severe loss of time. Now, you know how they say that time goes by really quickly, like when you're having fun. Well, you might not be having fun, but there's definitely quote unquote blackout time frames. And not necessarily that you are blacked out. You could be on autopilot. If somebody was looking at you, it wouldn't look like you're going through anything, existential, if you will. But realistically speaking, what is happening is that you're not going to have a sense of time because the fragmented parts of self are basically elevating your vibration and frequency out of your physical body and in a space where there is no time and space, in order to, again, kind of assess where all of these fragmented versions of self are and how squeezing them back into an oversoul, a sense of oneness, is actually going to better all of the different versions of self that are alive and well in different dimensions. But the loss of time is like you're dazed and confused. You may be, again, you could be fully engaged working on the computer, doing tasks and chores. Maybe you're driving. I don't know about y'all, but driving is something that always amazes me, because you should be hella alert when you're driving. But at the same time, I kind of arrive back in my driveway and I'm just like, wow, how did I get here? I have no memory of that drive whatsoever, because I'm doing different things in different time and space. And if you're saying, yes, that happens to me, the reason for that is because we are accelerating at a speed, at a time, at a pressure, at a density that our physical bodies aren't organically and naturally fine-tuned to. And so there is kind of this weird sensory thing that happens to the physical body, and our minds go on autopilot to kind of take over the mundane tasks and chores, and our soul space kind of detaches, if you will, from the physical form to kind of, reminisce and kind of piece together some thoughts, some ideas that are taking place on a soul level that you're not going to have any memory of when you jolt back into your body, but it's still very important nonetheless. And so a loss of time is going to be very evident here this week, It could be, missing chunks like hours. Maybe it's just a few minutes. Maybe you find yourself, feeling like time is taking forever, but realistically speaking, only 2 minutes went by. It can manifest in different ways for each and every single one of us, but time distortion is time distortion. And in some way, in some shape, in some experience, you are going to realize that time is either speeding up, slowing down, or totally non-existent. That being said, that's going to create a lot of confusion, and confusion and disorientation are a thing that we have to kind of expect here this week. Everything is going to feel weird AF. Okay, so not only is time wackadoodle, not only are your thoughts and your emotions wackadoodle, but it's going to feel like you're being torn between two different versions of self, two different worlds, two different timelines, two different situations and scenarios. And it's all very, very disorienting for good reason. I don't know if you noticed or not, but human beings are a little bit kind of stuck in their ways. And again, like I previously mentioned, we want to control everything. That's just the ego programming's way of keeping the physical meat suit alive and well. But at the same time, when you find yourself in a state that is so overwhelming, when something really shakes you up in life, and I hate to continue to use bad examples because it doesn't always have to happen in a bad way. But you get unexpected news of someone that you love passes, right? It turns into this very euphoric thing where time stands still. You don't know if you're coming or going. All the things that you were allowing to consume your mind that had the greatest of importance suddenly doesn't matter anymore. And I'm not saying that we're all going to, receive news of people passing, although eclipse energy, specifically in the Pisces axis, is about souls wanting to go home. The point that I'm trying to make is that sometimes we have situations and circumstances that pop off in our lives in order to kind of put into perspective what it is that we have to kind of release, like where it is that I'm not saying that we wave our white flag, because surrendering just kind of seems like, the life got kicked out of us. We have no more fight in us. We definitely have fight in us. It's just we reach a particular point where, everything has to become confusing. Everything has to become overwhelming. Everything has to become so heavy and weighted in order for us to reach a quote unquote breaking point where we're more open to surrendering. And that is essentially we're having these eclipses because the North and South Node are on the Pisces and Virgo axis. And the North Node does need us to lean into the qualities and characteristics that is currently positioned in, which is Pisces energy, which is true surrender. Surrendering to the fact that it is just a psychological operation that we have convinced ourselves that we're in control of anything, because we're technically in control of nothing. And so we have to kind of get to the point here this week where we are feeling overwhelmed and confused, where we are feeling so disoriented, so discombobulated that we just kind of throw our hands up and learn to enjoy the ride, so to speak. And that is a very hard thing for a lot of people to do. This is emotional roller coaster energy. We are being tossed into a whirlpool of emotion and karmic reckoning with this eclipse. And because of that, we're going to be feeling everything and nothing all at the same time. And I know that sounds, like, oh, well, that's easy to predict. We're either going to feel everything or nothing. You could go from hopefulness to hopeless in 2 seconds. You could go from excitement and eagerness to absolute numbness and avoidance, and then back again. This is a point in time where everything overlaps. And when I say interdimensional bleed, I'm talking about emotions too. We have to feel the polarizing emotions pretty much taking up space at the exact same time. That means that grief and happiness can exist at the exact same moment. That can mean that hopefulness and hopelessness can be felt at the exact same moment. That means that feeling everything and feeling nothing can happen at the exact same moment and then back again. And because we are kind of being tossed into this karmic and emotional and intuitive whirlpool where eclipse energies are concerned, it's going to feel very hard to kind of feel stable, like we are anchored into reality. And just as we kind of focus, I always remember watching figure skating when I was younger. And you know how like they skate around really, really fast and then they come into a tight spiral. They start spiraling like really, really, really fast. And then they just easily come out of it. And I used to say to myself, A, how do they not puke on the ice? Because I probably would be puking. And then like B, how are they not dizzy? And I can't even remember. It was probably my grandmother at the time that told me that like when they go into that spin, they focus on one particular point. One point that isn't spinning. So maybe they're looking up at the ceiling and there's a light fixture there. Well, they don't unlock their focus until they come out of that spiral. And by looking at something stable, they're able to kind of override the dizziness that should be taking place when you put your body into a full spiral. The reason why I'm saying that is because when we're in this whirlpool of emotion and intuition and karma and everything is just tossing us around, if you kind of let your body surrender to it, you're probably going to feel dizzy, probably going to feel nauseous. But if we can focus on one point, and I would say if you could create a happy place in your mind, or at least get a very clear vision of the potential future that you want to be living and hold it so strongly in your mind's eye and in your heart space while we're going through this very disorienting type of energy for this week for sure, but technically, you know, eclipse season is eclipse season is eclipse season. If you can focus on that, that is going to be the only stable ground that is going to keep you anchored to what is true and what is real and what your hope and what your inspiration and what your motivation needs to be, even when the dark parts come to like knock the wind out of you and to, you know, illuminate to you how hard it's going to be. And when all of these memories start flashing back, because on this emotional roller coaster here this week, we have the darkest parts of our memories, of our soul contracts, not even from this incarnation, but from all of the other incarnations that, again, the fragmented parts of self are coming together under the umbrella of the oversoul in order to compact back into a sense of wholeness to see what timelines and wounds that were collapsing. There is going to be an overwhelming wave, if you will, of not so nice emotions and not so nice thoughts and really ugly memories that are going to try to dim the light on the hopefulness, on the potentiality of the outcome in which you actually want to be kind of building and creating for your future. And so if we can pick a particular point of focus that is as happy and excitable and as inspiring as possible to keep us focused on the hope that needs to carry us through the darker parts of our journey, that is going to be the way that we survive this with as little disorientation, if that's even a word, discombobulation, if you will, that we could possibly be experiencing with all of these highs, lows, and everything in between. I feel like as far as the sensory part of life goes, talking about our eyes, it's very hard when you have like waters being splashed in your eyes, especially salt water from the ocean. When I'm talking about salt water from the ocean, I'm also talking about tears, because tears are likely going to be a part of this emotional roller coaster here this week. But watery eyes. So maybe you're not crying. Maybe it's just that your eyes won't stop watering, but it's definitely kind of blurring the vision. It is not allowing us to see as clearly as we would like. And because of the water effect that we're going to be tossed into here, and it's going to feel like our emotions are trying to whittle us down, if you will, because when you talk about waves crashing upon Earth, waves, of course, the emotional, karmic, intuitional waves of Pisces onto Earth, which is Virgo, you know, the Earth will erode, and we are being eroded, and our patterns, our programs are being eroded. That's not a bad thing. When you have a survival program that is constantly running the choices, the decisions, the actions in which you make in real time each and every single day, but you're no longer in a particular environment that needs for that survival program to be running, it's pretty hard to shift from survivor to thriver with the survivor programming still running in the background. So we have to basically allow these emotions to crash over us. We have to allow this water energy to cleanse and purify us, even if it erodes our programming, even if it erodes our ability to think clearly, to see clearly, to feel clearly. We have to just learn to be enjoying the ride, which is essentially the ride from hell in some cases, okay? It does not feel fun. It does not feel good. I feel like the watery sensation is not only just going to be an issue with our eyes. I feel like as far as our spit goes, you know how your mouth fills up with that watery sensation right before you're about to puke? Well, we are on an emotional roller coaster. We are being tossed around in a karmic whirlpool. We are being triggered and activated from all different timelines and dimensions. So it would make sense that there is going to be a sense of nausea take over here this week. We are in Virgo season. Digestive issues are a thing. We hold our emotions in our digestive system. So again, to understand that we're going through an emotional purification, a ego programming, recoding, rewiring, we would have to expect that that energy manifest in our digestive system. And I do think that there is enough, being tossed around here this week to create a state of dizziness, of disorientation, of nausea. But that is definitely going to be more felt on the stomach flip-floppy side. So whether it is the elevator experience where you're in that elevator and all of a sudden the elevator stops, but your stomach keeps going, whether it is literally like you're seasick, whatever the case may be, there's going to be so much emotional reprogramming going on in the body here this week that the digestive tract is going to respond because of it. We do talk about head pressure pretty much every week, specifically Mercury moving into Virgo energy. I already talked about how that head space is going to be rapidly changing and how the head pressure is probably going to overwhelm us. I would also want to throw in there Uranus retrograding in this Gemini energy is probably the greatest jolt to our head space. And here's the thing. Yeah, you could have a headache. Yes, head pressure. Yes, dizziness, whatever. I want to talk about the pulsating vibration that we're all going to be experiencing. I want you to, again, I'm going to give you another analogy. You go to like a band or a concert, or maybe you just found yourself back in the 90s in the back of a Honda Civic, okay? The music is absolutely way too loud, but you're a teenager, you think you're cool. That's cool. You're basically sitting on subwoofers, okay? And the car, you can hear every screw in the car just vibrate to a vibration and frequency that the whole thing should have just shattered the windows, and the whole, like, the doors should have blown off. Everything just should have fell apart because it was that loud. There was that much vibration and frequency moving through that vehicle. It was also moving through you. And I don't know if you ever kind of got out of that vehicle, you could still feel the music like coursing through you. But even in the headspace, like your eardrums do this weird recalibration where it feels like there is like a pulsating speaker in your head, and you can feel these waves of frequency move through your body, and it kind of triggers goosebumps, This is what I think we're going to be feeling in the headspace. And I think that, as far as the sensation goes in the headspace, the pulsating vibration, that wave that of energy, like being able to hear the music inside your head type of thing, that is going to be a new sensation. And where our sensory inputs are concerned, I would say that our audio system, so the music, the frequency, the sounds that we're able to pick up on are going to be hijacked here this week. Hijacked, probably not the right word. Tuned up, turned up, volume all the way up, maxed out. And our smell system. I think that smells are going to be truly activating, and music is going to be truly activating, not only for your own incarnation experience, but again, the interdimensional bleed of having the other versions of self kind of get smushed back into one. I think that's going to put our sensory systems where our hearing and our smell kind of gets moved into overdrive. Now, there's going to be some jaw tension. I want you to think about clenching for the worst. Okay, I'm not saying that the worst is coming. I'm saying that we as humans hold our body in a very clenched up, rigid type of way because we're always waiting for the ball to drop. And because the energies are going to be so discombobulating here this week, I think that we're waiting for that impact of shit hitting the fan, so to speak. And I don't even think we're aware that we are holding our jaw as tightly as we are, but that baby's going to be clenched. And that's probably going to add to some of the headaches or the head tension that many of us are going to be experiencing. Of course, we hold that weight, we hold that tension in our neck and in our shoulders as well. But here's where I think it's coming from: the karmic whiplash that is taking place by, collecting all the fragmented versions of self, squishing them back into a state of wholeness, and then separating them just as quick. That's whiplash. Having memories come back and jolt you back into that timeline, back into that experience, and then you come back into reality, into your physical body, that is energetic whiplash. And we're going to feel that energetic whiplash by the physical whiplash symptoms in which we would experience if we were in a situation such as a car accident, which most people do experience whiplash from. It's that sudden jolt where our neck and our head gets jolted too fast, too hard, into a direction that isn't comfortable, and then back again. And so, we carry a lot of our weight, our roles and responsibilities, the emotional weight as well, on our shoulders, the weight of the world, carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. And we're reviewing our soul contracts from all times, timelines, storylines, dimensions, all at once. That whiplash is going to be a thing. And even more than that, I think that I got to talk about the brain for a second. So as you know, we're in Virgo season. We are trying to rewire the system from the inside out. When Mercury moves into Virgo energy, that's going to be like very hard on the head because we're rewiring in real time. Now, when Uranus retrogrades in Gemini energy, as I previously spoke about, that's the higher realms of intelligence and the lower level intellect trying to break that partition wall down so that they can kind of be more fluid and communicate a little bit easier without, constantly having to second guess where this information is coming from and how to make logical, practical sense of it and how to actually put it into real time, blah, 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 blah. Because of our neural pathways, which again, create a electrical spark in our brains when we challenge the old neural pathways, which have gotten too comfortable. That's what we're trying to rewire, is those hardwired systems. We're going to feel a lot of electrical shocks throughout the body. Now, yes, the real neural rewiring in our brain happening in real time, if we were able to see it on an MRI scan, for example, we would see all of those different areas of the brain have sparks light up. Obviously, we can't do that, but we're going to feel the electrical shock through our physical body. So you may have electrical shocks in your hands or in your feet or in your organs, whatever the case may be. It doesn't feel fun, but it is highly indicative that there is a part of your brain being rewired in your favor. And because the electrical grid is going to be affected by Uranus retrograding in this Gemini energy, and because that electrical grid has a common electrical grid with our brain and neural nets over our brain, there's going to be electrical glitching. So again, it's almost like, what we would expect to experience when Mercury is retrograde with tech malfunctions and miscommunications and, all the things of the sort. It is a certain sense of kind of expecting that type of energy, but I think the most of it is feeling that electrical surge, those shocks, those tremors move through the physical form. And that is a good sign, although it doesn't feel good. It is a good sign that there is deep neural recoding happening on the levels in which we need it to be happening on in order to bring the higher self online as the permanent operating system. So it doesn't feel good, not supposed to. It can, I call it brain glitching, where we have memory lapse, forgetting, common names or common words that we should know, forgetting very important things. Again, this is the distortion, the time distortion happening. It's also the interdimensional bleed of all the different versions of self trying to merge. when we go through a defragging process, it is looking at the memory packets or the data storage of a computer, if you will, and trying to figure out what you want to keep and what you want to delete. And so, like when you get that notification on your phone, let's say that your iCloud storage is full and you're already paying for the top tier, and you need to go ahead and you need to delete some pictures and some videos and everything of the sort. This is all the different versions of self doing their own individualized defragging and deleting of their memory stick. But then when we come together as this like whole version of self under the Oversoul source code, that is us trying to determine, okay, well, if the lowest version of self on the lower timeline, on the lower density, needs this particular memory wiped out in order for the pain and trauma to be released from that particular timeline and form, how does that alter all of the other different identities operating on different timelines and dimensions? And so this is where we get brain farts. This is where we just can't seem to put our words together. It's like we're drunk and we're just blabbering. There's just a bunch of verbal vomit, if you will. It's just like we can't make sense of things. Things aren't linear at all this week. They're not like in a system or in a structure that makes sense. Virgo energy wants to create order out of the chaos that is ensuing here this week in order to discombobulate the system to the point where we surrender the control that we feel like we need to have so that we can be a little bit more open-minded, if you will, open-hearted to adopting new ways of doing things, which is the only way that we can create new neural pathways, which of course upgrades the operating system. It's all connected. And so with that being said, there's this weird excitement that we may have, and we wake up and we're just hopeful and we're excited. Over what? Nothing's changed. Nothing's happening, but yet we can't shake it. Something's different. We're looking around. We're trying to figure it out. We're trying to be so self-aware, moving through our thoughts, moving through our emotions to figure out what this new excitement could be or what it currently is, because there is this like, I feel like something's about to change, but I don't know what that is. That's karma, baby. And karma is going to be working its ass off for the next couple of weeks in order to sort us out and put us on the path that we failed to put ourselves upon. And in doing so, there is this, again, fragmented unification of our oversoul, and then the individualization of that new whole oversoul being fragmented out back into its respective dimensions again. And so that is very all over the place and disorienting. And so, let's just say, for instance, you have a dimensional self operating on the 6th dimension, and they're going through something exciting. Well, that excitement trickles down to the lowest of the fragmented souls. And so something may not happen for you in your physical realm in the present moment here and now, but it's happening for a different version of you in a totally different time and space. And if you're listening to me right now and you're like, man, I want to be on the drugs that she's on, this isn't drugs at all. This isn't even spiritualism. This isn't even woo-woo, okay? This is quantum mechanics. This is science, okay? You hear all those people out there, trust the science? Well, if you want to trust the science, understand quantum entanglement. Understand that they can teleport a small molecule at the duration of time and speed of light at this particular time frame. Look into the scientific revelations that they are actually disclosing, which technically speaking, if it's new to us, then that means that it's been around probably for 50 plus years to the greater, grander, shadow government. But like when I talk about all these timelines and when I talk about different dimensions of self, and when I talk about the entanglement of having a different version of self experience excitement that you're going to feel in this timeline, but that you don't have anything exciting happening to validate that that emotion should be happening for you in the here and now, understand that this is not woo-woo. This is not psychic abilities. This is not spiritualism. This is actual science. Believe it or not, I know I sound cray-cray most of the time, but I'm actually a science-oriented type of person. And this is where, my healing journey has gotten very interesting. I guess, you gotta be dead for a couple of hours in order to understand how the world actually works. But when you come back to it, it makes a lot of sense, both scientifically and spiritually speaking. And so sometimes when I go on these rants and raves, I have people say, well, I don't even understand what you're talking about. Like, that's got to be some intense spiritualism going on. I'm like, no, it's actually science. Do a deep dive into quantum mechanics and quantum entanglement and understand particle theory. And it's really not that far-fetched. So anyways, that's my little science plug. I want to talk about the heart chakra for a second. Venus in this Leo energy. Now, let me also say this. We have an overabundance of other things going on here that the heart activations actually aren't as strong, let's call them, or as intense as they've been in some more difficult placements. I think Venus in Leo energy is a beautiful energy. I think it is a empowering energy. We're definitely not having the heart attack sensations that we had just a couple of weeks ago. Thank goodness for that. But, there is so much, I'm going to say there's so much focus on the rewiring of the mental plane that the heart is kind of playing in the background. And of course, all of this reprogramming is stemming out from the heart space. We just got downloaded with this new version of self. And, it comes through the heart chakra. And so, yeah, there's going to be flutters, I would say, and there's going to be excitement, and there's going to be, when you get like very excited for something and you're like, your heart palpitates a little bit. There's that type of palpitation. But I just feel like for the most part, our heart chakra is trying to give us this new, fresh, bold stability. It's like, I know what I'm worth. I know what I'm worthy of. I know what I'm deserving of. I know what I want. I know what I need in my life. I know what I desire. I don't know how I'm going to get it, but I trust that it's going to happen. And we're just holding very firmly in that heart space, which isn't a bad thing. But I do think that it is going to create a thirst maybe physically speaking, where you are thirsty, where you do need to be hydrating and drinking a lot more, specifically through eclipse season where everything is wackadoodle. I would suggest that anyways. But like there's this thirst to bring new passion and new excitement online. And there's this thirst to want to see the change that we've already made within ourselves. We want to see that in the physical realm. And there's this thirst to kind of fill our cup up more than it's been operating from. And the thirst to kind of cut things off, cut people out and eliminate and release and purge to make space for the new is very intense as well. So again, as we have all these fluctuating energies coming at us here this week, it is very important to drop down into that heart space, to remind ourselves what it is that we are fighting for, what it is that we want to build and create, and what needs to be done in order to free up the space to do just that. And that's kind of choosing to orient to that heart space and to remind ourselves that everything is going to be okay, that we are going to build and create the realm and reality of our choosing. We just need to kind of get cleansed and purified of the junk and the gunk before we're able to do that. Of course, our sleep state has definitely taken a little bit of a turn. Now, let me just say this. There's a very fine line as we move through eclipse season between having prophetic and cryptic dreams that help us piece together not only what it is that we're moving away from, but what it is that we're moving closer to. There's a fine line between that and being totally hijacked. Now, could be hijacked by a not so great astral entity, and you will definitely know if you feel quote unquote victimized or like you're trapped or like you're on the run or whatever the case may be, and it's very intense as if you're living it and you wake up with that same kind of intensity. That's an astral hijack. But there's also another hijack, which I wanted to talk about, which is stemming back from this interdimensional bleed of the version of selves being smushed back together, where I'm taking all of the unconscious parts of all the different versions of self, smushing them back together in a state of wholeness, and having that unconscious information needing to be processed on each individualized dimensional level. And so it's almost like maybe you see yourself, but you look a little bit different. Or maybe you feel like you're you from, first person perspective in your dreamscape, but you're dealing with all of these people and you're dealing in environments that they're talking to you like you should be familiar with, but you're not familiar with it. That's likely a different version of you's dream content that you're getting to experience. All of this is very important. All of this helps to kind of remind us who it is that we are at that original source code. It's all very helpful in trying to identify why it is that we think certain ways and feel certain things and have the memories that we do when we don't actually have the reality to support that particular dream content. So pay attention to that. I would say that the want, need, and desire to kind of be alone and do this on your own is probably going to be very high. Virgo energy is kind of, hermity, if you will. And eclipse season is no joke. And technically speaking, if you have all these different versions of selves coming together for an oversoul overlay, an amalgamation of that oversoul, technically you're never really alone. But the want, need, and desire to isolate until we stabilize is going to be very strong. And with some of the physical sensations popping off, sometimes it's just easier to kind of, be on your own and by yourself and limit that type of external stimulation until you feel okay within yourself to kind of deal with that. And I just think that with all of the glitching, with all of the energy fluctuations, with all of the rewriting of our neural pathways, with all of the defragging of all of the individual dimensional coding going on, I just think that there's probably going to be a lot of nervousness in the body, a lot of jitteriness that doesn't feel so good, doesn't feel so safe, so secure. And when we're not feeling secure and safe and stable and confident within ourselves, the last thing that we want to do is be around a bunch of people. And so again, that's just going to kind of push you to want to kind of ride this particular wave alone. That's okay, because at the end of the day, you're never alone. At the end of the day, you're not cray-cray. At the end of the day, there's a whole freaking community here going through the exact same thing. So there's a difference between being alone and doing things on your own and feeling lonely and feeling isolated. And so, of course, if you find yourself feeling alone and isolated, come back, drop a comment. I can guarantee you there's going to be somebody in the comment section going through the exact same thing. And that's going to reassure to you that you're not alone. You're not doing this alone, that there's a whole freaking collective backing you here. And if you need that extra community type of support, I would really encourage you to jump over to Patreon, join our community where we do the daily work, not only to remind each other that you're not alone and you're not cray-cray, but to actually move through the energies instead of allowing those energies to move you. So guys, that's all that I wanted to cover for this week. We are definitely in for a very interesting dynamic that is definitely going to spice things up in a very interesting way. And of course, by the time I come back here next week to discuss the following week, we are going to be smack dab in that eclipse energies. So again, you are not cray-cray. Again, you are not alone. We are all moving through it. This is definitely going to be an interesting chapter that will change the game in the long term for the better. I thank you for tuning in. I send you so much love, and we'll talk to you soon.